Deep within the rugged eucalyptus-draped escarpments of Australia's Great Dividing Range, an ancient and unforgiving ecosystem stretches out over thousands of miles. Science has largely categorized the strange encounters reported in these valleys as mere colonial ghost stories. Yet, hidden within this massive landscape, eyewitnesses continue to describe an anomaly that defies official classification. The locals just call it the Yowie. It is described with alarming consistency as an 8 to 10 foot tall, heavily muscled biped. It is completely wrapped in dense reddish-brown fur, carrying its immense heavy weight on incredibly wide feet, and features a flat face with protruding tusk-like canine teeth used for both foraging and intimidation. To determine if a creature of this scale exists, we have to look past individual campfire tales and apply a forensic framework. We will cross-examine 3 completely isolated historical datasets to look for overlapping physical evidence. In this framework, if 3 unconnected eras of history report identical physical variables, the case for a shared biological reality moves from myth into the realm of forensic probability. The first dataset resides in the ancient oral traditions of Indigenous Australian tribes. For centuries before European settlement, the tribes along the eastern seaboard passed down detailed accounts of an entity known by regional names like the Gindernine. Importantly, these entities were not categorized as ethereal spirits or mythological metaphors. Indigenous elders documented them as literal, physical wild men of the bush, existing as a tangible part of the landscape. The lore recorded specific territorial behaviors. Elders noted that the creature would violently snap massive tree branches to mark its hunting grounds. If hunters ventured too deep into specific forbidden valleys, the consequences were physical. They were met with terrifying guttural roars and a barrage of heavy stones thrown from the dense scrub. These Dreamtime stories functioned as literal survival data. They served as a practical warning for tribes navigating the deep valleys, establishing the creature as a biological defender of its territory. In the late 19th century, European pastoralists and loggers pushed blindly into the Great Dividing Range, unknowingly testing those ancient indigenous warnings. Throughout the 1880s and 1890s, colonial newspapers published reports of a creature they called the Yahoo. One 1882 account from the remote New South Wales bush describes a group of seasoned bushmen who were stalked by a massive, unknown entity. The men provided a detailed eyewitness account of a massive creature stepping out from behind a gum tree, cutting off their path. The pioneers described a towering biped covered in dense reddish fur. They explicitly noted its long, tusk-like canine teeth and stated that it emitted a deafening roar before vanishing into the heavy brush. This pioneer reality intersected with the ancient lore. Without any knowledge of First Nations traditions, these colonial settlers provided a second, entirely independent verification of the creature's exact anatomy and temperament. Today, the search has evolved from campfire stories and colonial newspaper clippings to the deployment of bioacoustic monitoring teams. By strapping long-duration microphones to trees deep within the range, researchers remove human eyewitness bias from the equation entirely. When these teams analyze their audio wave monitors, they find unidentifiable acoustic anomalies. The microphones are capturing guttural roars and the heavy, localized snapping of massive tree branches. When we compare these modern acoustic captures to our historical records, they align perfectly with the roars reported by the Bushmen in 1882 and the territorial branch snapping documented in ancient oral traditions. Modern acoustic surveillance has pulled the Yowie out of the realm of myth and into the realm of a measurable biological anomaly. We have now tested 3 vastly different cultures against one another. These groups operated centuries apart, possessing no means of collaboration or shared communication. Synthesizing these independent findings, all 3 isolated datasets overlap on the exact same variables: localized aggression, reddish fur, tusk-like canines, and acoustic signatures. In forensic investigation, this unbroken chain of matching evidence across centuries suggests a constant underlying physical cause. The data points toward the Yowie not as a folklore character, but as a territorial survivor adapted to the harshest terrain on the continent. The strength of this evidence forces a haunting realization. the Australian bush remains vast enough to hide an 8-foot-tall apex predator. For over a century, the Yowie has occupied a space in outback folklore, often dismissed by researchers as misidentified feral wildlife or a lingering colonial myth. Recently, professional trackers and bioacoustic monitoring teams have begun conducting systematic surveys across the rugged eastern seaboard of Australia. These specialists are utilizing high-resolution trail cameras, long-duration subsonic microphones, and environmental DNA extraction to document the region's biodiversity. Their specific goal is to identify the physical presence of a massive, unclassified hominid reported to be navigating these remote corridors. The resulting data moves the investigation toward a biological inquiry, supported by a growing catalog of empirical field evidence. A baseline for this biological presence was established in the late 1970s near Woodenbong, New South Wales, during a concentrated period of sightings. These accounts involve dozens of unconnected locals, including farmers and the police officers seen in this photograph from the era. Witnesses consistently described a heavily muscled, 8-foot-tall biped with reddish-brown fur and a flat facial structure. These reports also noted specific behavioral patterns, such as a distinct lumbering gait and the tracking of livestock perimeters at night. The volume of these reports eventually drew national media attention to Woodenbong, characterizing the creature as a localized biological presence rather than a fleeting anomaly. In the 1990s, the investigation expanded into the dense valleys and rocky cliffs of the Blue Mountains, an area known for its inaccessible terrain. During this period, national park rangers and experienced bushwalkers began reporting a series of close-quarters encounters. These accounts detailed territorial behaviors, where the biped would parallel stalk hikers through the brush and hurl large rocks to drive them out of specific valleys. Field observers also reported finding thick eucalyptus branches snapped by hand, alongside sightings of massive furred shoulders and prominent tusk-like teeth. The documentation of these traits suggested the presence of an aggressive territorial predator occupying a specific niche in the mountain ecosystem. Contemporary tracking teams now operate deep within the Great Dividing Range, looking for physical indicators of the creature's movements. Recently, these teams located a series of heavy, anomalous footprints pressed deep into the outback clay. This footprint measured 18 inches in length. The depth of the impression in the hard clay suggests a bipedal occupant weighing over 600 pounds. Nearby, trackers found eucalyptus trees with bark stripped away 8 feet above the ground. The deep, parallel gouges are consistent with the use of canine teeth for territorial marking. In April 2026, a monitoring team used AI sound classification to analyze audio captured in a remote, uncharted valley. The arrays recorded a subsonic guttural roar that failed to match the profiles of any known Australian wildlife. A nearby 4K trail camera captured this footage of a 9-foot biological entity, showing dense fur and significant musculature as it moved through the brush. Following the encounter, eDNA extracted from the soil inside the footprint revealed a genetic sequence belonging to an unclassified primate. The findings from the Great Dividing Range suggest that a distinct biological entity may be operating within the remote sections of the Australian interior. Traditional explanations attributing these encounters to misidentified feral animals are increasingly challenged by the specific physical data gathered in the field. The 18-inch footprints, the elevated bark gouges, and the unclassified eDNA sequences indicate a biological presence that has yet to be formally cataloged. Field teams are continuing to move into the more isolated sectors of the bush to further map these occurrences. These results indicate that the ecology of the outback contains significant, unmapped variables that modern science is only beginning to document. Evidence indicates that a massive, unclassified apex primate is successfully thriving in the shadows of modern civilization,